Hello everybody and welcome back to Media Linguistics. Today I'll be discussing whether there was ever a British Romance language. French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese and Romanian are Romance languages. The Romance language family is made up of former Roman colonies that slowly adapted Vulgar Latin over hundreds of years into distinct languages and dialects. Britain was also part of the Roman Empire. However, today, unlike the rest of Western Europe, it speaks a Germanic language, not a Romance one. Some people may argue that this is because of the fact that the Anglo-Saxons originated in Germany and English people are descended from the Anglo-Saxons. However, this is only partly true, as the Romans lived in Britain before the Anglo-Saxons. So in theory, they should have had a greater impact on the language. The French were also invaded by a Germanic people, the Franks, yet they still speak a Romance language today. To answer this question, we have to go back to the late 1st century, when Rome had taken over most of Britain. The vast majority of local people speaking Brittonic, a Celtic language, had no knowledge of Latin because most of them were not Roman citizens. After a few hundred years, the native Celtic peoples began to pick up Vulgar Latin. Vulgar Latin was a variation of Latin which common people across the Roman Empire had derived from Classical Latin, the language of the elite. However, normally, when the dominant group of people teach their language to foreigners, a lot often gets lost in translation, and the language that the non-native speakers begin learning diverges from the original language. Historical linguists are still unsure of the specifics of this British form of Vulgar Latin, but we know it was different from the Latin spoken in France. This is because, when learning a language, we inherently apply our native language's grammar rules to our target language. Many distinct grammatical features would have probably been added to British Latin, however we don't have enough evidence to diagnose specific linguistic properties. So, if this variety of Vulgar Latin was so popular, what prevented it from joining the ranks of its Romance brothers and sisters? In the 5th century, the Anglo-Saxons invaded from Germany. They were speakers of different Germanic languages, which eventually became Old English. Since Britain was on the outskirts of the Roman Empire, it was harder to control, and so less people were made to learn Latin and become Roman citizens. Although many were bilingual, most Celts decided to learn the Old English the Anglo-Saxons brought with them, instead of speaking Latin. Most of the people in the north of Britain never learnt Latin anyway, as the Romans had far less control over the territory. Despite the fact that for the most part British Latin had been wiped out in Britain by the 6th century, there is convincing evidence that pockets of Latin speakers remained in isolated communities. The Roman city of Verulamium, modern-day St Albans, was one of them. Far away from the Anglo-Saxons, they spoke their own Neo-Latin dialect for centuries after Latin had gone extinct in the rest of the country. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join us next week for part 2, where I attempt to reconstruct this British Latin and go into more detail about the evolution of the English language.